I have a disability, but the council keeps putting me in inappropriate housing. How can I make them listen to me? It's a really good question coming through the comments, and I can give you a good answer, but it's not a complete answer because equality law and disability law is very complicated. It's very good, but it's not something I can kind of give a full answer to. But I can give some helpful pointers basically. So the first thing that you want to do if you have any disability at all is you want to be mentioning it from day one. And again, I've said it so many times, do not speak to the council on the phone if you can help it, or in person. Everything needs to be in writing. There's no getting around that. This is something which you want to have a paper trail for everything. So even if you have to speak to someone on the phone, always follow it up with an email which says, I said this, you said this. So you've got that written record, because without that, things just get lost. The key thing if you have a disability is that you want to explicitly and in detail explain it to the council from day one. So let's use a fairly simple example where someone needs a wheelchair, and that means that they need wheelchair accessible accommodation. They can't do steps and so on. They want to be making clear from day one that they have a disability. The maybe potentially medical conditions that go with it. Other things are relevant to the treatment, but you specifically want to say what the council needs to do in order to respond to that. So for example, in the example of a wheelchair, you want to say, I need accommodation. All the accommodation I get offered needs to have level access, to get into the property. It might be that you need particular bathing facilities, so level access shower, that sort of thing. Things like the doors need to be wide enough to fit a wheelchair through. I know that sounds obvious, but you need to say this stuff. So crucially, what you've then got, and it doesn't magically mean the council's going to actually respond to you properly, but what it means is you have got evidence that you made them aware that you had a disability, and you basically said what reasonable adjustments need to be made to the service they provide in order to kind of respond to that disability, so that if they don't down the line, you've got a big stick to wave at them basically. And I'll give you some other examples which kind of may be less obvious. So let's say, for example, and I've seen this a lot, where you've got families where one of the children has autism, and as a result of that they don't do well with change. So that one of your reasonable adjustments that you're saying at the beginning is, we need to not be moved around lots. We need to not be kind of given 24 hours notice or 12 hours notice to move temporary accommodation. We need to be put somewhere where we're going to be for as long as possible before the decision's reached. But you also have situations, for example, where the children are getting particular support at school. So it's completely reasonable to say, we need temporary accommodation which is in travelling distance of this school, because they're engaging well with the school's been really good with them. It's important for their education and their well-being that they continue being able to access this school. And often it's going to be really easy to get supporting information from the school about that. So that's something you can do. As I've said in another recent video, if you've got someone with a visual impairment, that's the disability, but the reasonable adjustment is that they're put in accommodation which they're not moved around lots, so they're given one temporary accommodation address which they've got the time to familiarise themselves with, in order to kind of get around and stuff, and they need to not be moved lots as part of that kind of service. So again, that's another example. Another one might be that you've got a personality disorder, and you are, you find things, particularly stressful, that you take it, you might find it particularly difficult to take information in when you're stressed, and homelessness is going to be stressful. So again, you can basically say, I need housing officers to provide me all the information I need to know in kind of simple language, or via email, and they need to give me time to take it all in. And it might be something like, I really struggle in customer service centres where I'm just sat and it's really busy and it's really stressful. Therefore, can the council kind of give me pre-booked appointments and not keep me waiting? That doesn't mean to say that they're magic and they'll never keep you waiting, but they should mean that they try their best to kind of meet that request because it's reasonable. So those are the kind of situations. There's many more that I could kind of probably give examples of. But as I say, the key thing here is that you need to spell out to them what your disabilities are and what adjustments that need to be made. And it seems, now I'm not in any way an expert in this, I'm beginning to kind of get into this kind of stuff now in my casework, but it appears that if councils fail to take reasonable adjustments, or fail to make reasonable adjustments, or fail to take into account someone's disability and they did know about it, they are potentially going to be subject to quite large compensation payouts. I heard of a case, and it's kind of third hand, so I'm not going to quote it or anything, but I think essentially there was a situation where the individual had dyslexia, quite significant dyslexia. They'd said to the council, when you write to me, it needs to be on coloured paper because that helps me take this information in. And the council just never actually did that ever. And so there's, again and again, these letters were getting sent out. This person really couldn't take the information in. And if I understand it correctly, the council ended up having to pay thousands of pounds worth of compensation just for something, I guess, as seemingly as simple as just not putting the information on the right coloured paper so that the person could actually understand it. So, there appears to be very large amounts of compensation available, and that means, very large penalties for councils for not doing this. But one of the defences councils might say is, well, we didn't know about it. So that's why it's so important that from day one, you are spelling out to them what needs to happen, and kind of take it from there. If you're in that situation, it's something that the LGO, the local government ombudsman, will be interested in. They've certainly written a report recently. I'll put the link in the chat, where they kind of looked at that kind of crossover between Equality Act stuff and Housing Act stuff, and how housing officers are under various duties. And the other thing to kind of bear in mind with this is that often housing officers will never have experienced or never had any training on the Equality Act. So that's something we worked with in Bedford Borough Council, where it was clear that some of these officers didn't understand any of these things, and any of the terminology or anything, and they were just making outrageous decisions. And one of the outcomes of complaining about that was that the whole team got decent quality training on the Equality Act. So, as with everything like this, it might seem very hopeless, but actually a good complaint with, those kind of like clear kind of recommendations for additional training or whatever can make a lot of difference for a lot of people. So it's always worth doing. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, if you've got questions, put them in the comment section, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And if you've got the time and the inclination, do share these kind of videos on other social media platforms like your Facebook page, because it's a good way of just getting it out there further. So yeah, hopefully that helps.